take this criticism with a grain of salt, but the idea that the Avs had $7 million in space to use from Gabriel Landeskog being put on LTIR, and they first off left some on the table, which you never get back. And second, they traded for Lars Eller and overpaid, and Jack Johnson. Like, look, sometimes it's not the biggest deals that, it's not the biggest name, the biggest splash that ends up putting you over the top. I just can't imagine Lars Eller and or Jack Johnson moving the needle for this team. So that's really where my criticism comes in, is they wake up on Monday with $4.6 million in LTIR space that's unused. And I say, why? It's not enough to activate Landeskog anyway. So why didn't you spend more? Why didn't you do more in this year that it's the last year you have Nathan MacKinnon on a $6.3 million deal before it quite literally doubles to 12.6? Don't you feel a need to, as the defending Cup champs, push a little bit harder, do a little bit more to add a piece to your team that can really be impactful? Because I don't see either one of those players being impactful in any way.
Okay. And then who's your other one?
Probably the Boston Bruins. Dmitry Orlov has just looked like an absolutely perfect fit. I love Tyler Bertuzzi.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. This is going to be one that we like. Oh, don't like.
Yeah.
I'm going to say the Edmonton Oilers.
Interesting.
Why? I just think it's a lateral move going with Mattias Ekholm. I think when you look at their deadline, it's a different stylistic fit. And I get that it's all about right now and trying to win and a piece that could help put you over the top. And that some would argue that Ekholm is the style of defender that you needed. I just felt like the cost and risk of tinkering with your power play, which it's almost impossible to win in the playoffs without it. I just think the risk is great. And I think the risk is great moving forward, because I think the Nashville Predators, who know Mattias Ekholm better than anyone, saw the writing on the wall. That they knew what they just went through with getting Ryan McDonagh for nothing, basically, from the Tampa Bay Lightning, because of the cap and contract that McDonagh has, that I think in a year, 15, 18 months time, that Mattias Ekholm deal is not going to age very well. And when you look at the first round pick and then also Tyson Barrie, I felt like it was a lot to give up. And I felt like the Oilers, especially when you compare it to some other moves that were made, could have just gone in a different direction.
It's interesting. I've watched the Oilers. The Oilers' biggest weakness for years has been goals against, and they need a solid defender. Do I think there's a risk in the length of Ekholm term? Yeah, that's fair. I think he's probably got 2 really good playoff runs this and next year, and then we'll see if he extends it into a third. As for the Oilers' power play, Tyson Barrie, as good as Tyson Barrie is, he was still the 4th most important player on the power play.
Okay, but he was one of the 1 or 2 most important players in their locker room.
Yeah, sure. And, so Mattias Ekholm has a good reputation there. I would like to think your room's strong enough. You can't lose. But on ice, the Oilers' power play, like you look in the 3 games since, they went 31%, which is what they were before. McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, they could be the first. Well, right now they're first, second, and third in league scoring on the power play, which hasn't happened since the Penguins had Lemieux, Francis, and Jagger in 96. And I really don't see it changing. Like, they're just so good. Bouchard's got a heavy shot. He's going to have to learn when to use it, I think, is the key. You don't use it all the time, but then you also can't be afraid sometimes to let it rip. You're a facilitator back there. I think their power play is fine. I just think their 5-on-5 defensive play has been the biggest weakness in Edmonton for, I don't know, since Chris Pronger left. Like, really, since 2007. You go look at the Oilers. No team gives up more goals. They've always given up goals. Now, I know that it's not just one player, team defense, but he solidifies their team 5-on-5 significantly where the majority of the game is played. I actually like that trade for now. I know Reed Schaefer in a first rounder, but that first rounder or Reed Schaefer wasn't helping the Oilers in the next 3 years, which is really, I think, their big push to make it. And Barrie and Bouchard were too much of the same. And I like Tyson Barrie. I've been a huge Tyson Barrie fan. But
I would have moved Bouchard before I moved Barrie, but that's just me.
Yeah, there's cap related and age, and age factor. And I think Evan Bouchard last year showed me when you pair him with the right partner as a young player, he's a lot better. And, there's lots of guys around the league where who your partner is as a blue liner can make a significant difference. And I think Evan Bouchard, we saw it with Duncan Keith. Now he's got a steadying influence in Ekholm. I actually think the trade will solidify their left top four, but it's also going to help Bouchard become more comfortable like he was last year.
Okay. What about you? Who were the two teams or trades that you didn't like?
Well, the one team, the Philadelphia Flyers. You got to how you didn't trade James Van Riemsdyk when everybody knew you were trying to trade him. To me, I know you weren't going to you probably weren't getting a first rounder, Frank, but you're getting nothing. And if I'm JVR, the only reason I'm re-signing in Philly is because they're going to pay me more than someone else in the free agent market. So to me, I think as a bottom team, that's kind of a lost opportunity. I just felt like they really bottomed out and essentially got nothing from him. And
I thought we were kind of looking playoff teams. I could pick on a bunch of teams that sort of didn't, I don't think really helped themselves that much. I would include the San Jose Sharks in that group too.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's fair. And then to me, the Carolina Hurricanes. I like Gostisbehere.
I want to quibble with both of your picks. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Shane Gostisbehere is going to help their power play, no question, right? And so when you look at Carolina, that's good. To me, it's the similar reason why you felt Colorado didn't maximize their cap space. Carolina is going to put Jesse Puljujarvi's $3 million, and he's going to start on their fourth line. I'm not sure that's the best use of $3 million for this year. I think that's a contract that has a little bit of buying in the future potential, which he'll sign for probably 1.2. And I think the long-term effects of that trade have much more impact than this year. But here's the thing about Carolina. At some point, I think Carolina has to make a big, significant move. They're good. They're always really good. But they've never been good enough to win when it matters. And I don't believe that these deals are going to help them win when it matters, which is the playoffs.
Let's start with the James Van Riemsdyk situation. And I think my read of the situation is the Flyers misread the market.
Yeah.
That if they were going to move him, which everyone knew they wanted to, it needed to be done 10 days ago.
Fair.
And my understanding is the ask from the Flyers for a while was 2 picks. They wanted a second and a third, something in that neighborhood. And they simply overcooked the market. That waiting until Friday to make that move, I don't care what he went for, whether it was just a third or just a fourth, not moving him at all is a failure. And waiting until Friday, it wasn't the players that were left. And it's not really a knock on James Van Riemsdyk. It's actually, there's also a bit of an indictment here on the rest of the league that they weren't creative enough to pull off a John Klingberg type trade and get this guy who is a significant net front presence on your team for next to nothing. But the issue the Flyers ran into is there were teams that made so many moves, they didn't have any space left. And I don't just mean cap space, I mean on their roster. Teams ran out of their need for players. And that's the issue that the Flyers did not properly identify. Now, with the Carolina Hurricanes, I'm going to totally disagree. Guess which team in the NHL has the best record since January 11th? Approaching 2 months now.
Yeah.
The Carolina Hurricanes.
I agree.
And they identified one player and one player alone that they felt was a true difference maker, and that was Timo Meier. They made a massive offer that I actually believe at the end of the day is better than what the San Jose Sharks got, and it'll be fascinating to watch. Now, once that player was off the board, they said, we don't see anyone else here that's worth giving up our future assets for. And I love that they drew a line in the sand, and instead of chasing their tail like every other team in the NHL seems to do, Go back to the Toronto Maple Leafs a couple years ago. Oh, we didn't get the pieces that we want. We're going to pivot to Nick Foligno because we feel like we still need to trade first-round picks. You get in trouble every time when you do that. You have to set a plan with process and stick to it. The Carolina Hurricanes, once Timo Meier was out, they said, well, we have $10 million in space. It's a luxury. Let's take a couple no-risk bets. Jesse Puljujärvi for free. We can stick him on our fourth line. We can try and find him some time with Sebastian Aho to see if they can recreate some of the magic that they had at World Juniors. And if it doesn't work out, well, we gave up nothing to get him, and we can just let him walk in the summer as a UFA if we really don't want to qualify him, which they won't. Or they can renegotiate and keep him. It's an asset that they can actually hang on to if they like it, if they like him. And then Shane Gostisbehere is a 50-point defenseman that they added for next to nothing. So you take the best team in the league for almost the last 60 days, and you add a 50-point defenseman and a free shot on your fourth line, who at the very beginning of last season looked like he might have been something. And I'm not a Jesse Puljujärvi believer, so don't think that I'm changing course on that. But once there were no difference makers, I love that they just said, nah, this ain't for us. We're not going to spin our wheels trying to throw away futures for this. We think our team's good enough just as it is, and I would agree.
Well, we'll see in the playoffs, because to me, regular season winning and playoff winning is just different. And
go back to what their owner said on my pod. Frankly speaking, we view the Stanley Cup playoffs as each round being a series of 7 coin flips. The best team doesn't win in the playoffs. And
well, that's a nice, you know what? That's a really nice thing to say when you don't win. It's Tampa Bay not being the best team. Like, Tampa Bay's been in 3 Stanley Cups. Are people saying they're not the best team? Like, I'll disagree with that strongly. Was Colorado not the best team in the league last year?
But that's not what the last 10 years have shown you in the NHL. That's the opposite of what the last 10 years have shown you. Those are outliers.
Outside of the Blues, which other teams? Like Pittsburgh was good. Washington was good.
No, Pittsburgh and Washington were not anywhere near the best teams in the league the years that they won. Not anywhere near it. They were the 2 and 3 seeds as they met each other in the playoffs in the Metro.
Yeah, well, the best team doesn't always have to mean the most points, right? I just look at...
Okay, but the point is their process of building, and we talked about this, is give yourself a 10-year window, a 10-year run. The Caps won 2 President's Trophies and then won with the roster that was not their best. The St. Louis Blues had 110-point teams in the early 2010s, mid-2010s, and won nothing. And then finally broke through in a year where they didn't have their best team. And in fact, were the last place team in the NHL in January. It's entirely random winning in hockey. So are they looking at it incorrectly? I guess in 10 years from now, if they don't win one, then we'll say yes. But right now, I think the data is strongly supporting their argument.
Well, we'll see. That's I just felt like with all that cap space, I understand, hey, the Jesse Puljujärvi bets, there's no risk to it. And I just felt
okay, so let's spin the conversation forward. Who would you have traded for once they didn't get Timo Meier? Answer your own question.
I said Patrick Kane would have been my next option to look at.
Is Patrick Kane going to go to Carolina?
Did they make a pitch?
I don't think he would ever even consider going there, but that's just me.
Yeah, and that's possible. But for a year, and hey, Kane's the wild card, but definitely I think you would at least have to find out, because after Timo Meier, I think we'd all agree he was the next.
The deal with Patrick Kane was actually, just FYI, was actually cooked before the Timo Meier trade.
Yeah,
timeline wise.
Yeah, like Timo Meier, like San Jose, you bring up a great point why they didn't take that supposed offer that was better from Carolina. That'll be one where, you know, you'd like the inside book as to what they made that choice. I know they're really high in the defenseman, but you know, we'll see. I was
shocked to hear Mike Greer acknowledge publicly that they seem to value the quantity over quality.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I look at the Mikey Eyssimont trade. If we're looking at value, Mickey Eyssimont came in on waivers for San Jose that you got for nothing. You played him in your top 6. You played him on your special teams. You seem to clearly like him. And then you traded him essentially for a 4th round pick because he's a pending Group 6 free agent. He's never had that opportunity in his life. Are you telling me he wouldn't want to re-sign in San Jose? And you were playing him in your top 6.
And then once they traded Nemesnikov, then they told teams, sorry, we're not trading any of our other forwards because we only have 11 left.
Yeah, like that was strange to me. So anyway, let's move on to who we like. Now we have 2 different categories here. We have who you like for the trade deadline and then who you like long-term. So give me your 2 best for kind of this year teams that you liked.
Boston Bruins, Dmitry Orlov, Bobby Orlov has been ridiculous. Like that fit has been crazy good. And I love Tyler Bertuzzi, just Brad Marchand light. To add another player like him to your roster, and then have the ability, if you want, once you have some guys moving out, could you potentially re-sign him? I doubt it, but it's at least worth a look or a consideration, depending on how well he fits. And I've really liked and valued Garnet Hathaway and all that he brings. So the injuries for Boston might be of some concern or consideration with Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno out for a bit. But that team has been an absolute buzzsaw, and I just don't see them going anywhere. In fact, I see them as much better now than they were 3 weeks ago. And the other team that I sort of like right now, I'm going to say the New York Rangers. Right now, I like them. I don't know that I like the moves for the long term, given what they gave up. But for right now, that top 6 is absolutely lethal. And if they can just find a way to defend better, they're going to be a way better team. I just think that they probably could have used a little bit more balance. Instead of Tarasenko and Kane, go one of those 2 and then try and add a defenseman if you can. But that's sort of the way I look at it. And right now, I just think it's hard to argue against them being as well positioned as anyone in the Metro.
I agree with you 100% on Boston. And the move really, the first trade, of course, with Orlov and Hathaway, I thought was an excellent move for them. It strengthened their team. It just made them better. And then they had to pivot because I don't think Bertuzzi was going to be coming to Boston if Hall and Foligno don't get injured this past week. I think that's totally fair. They wouldn't have the cap space to do it, but they decided we're not wasting it. And some would say, hey, that's the only first rounder, Frank, I think, for a pending UFA. A lot of the other first rounders for guys with term, or Timo Meier, who's an RFA, so you still have his rights, right? So I think they decided we're going for it. And I go back to Carolina. Oh, yeah, Carolina, yeah, you're right. I was thinking about like the week leading up to trade deadline. And but good point on Tarasenko. I look at whatever the package Carolina had for Timo Meier, Frank. I'm like, I would have thrown in an extra draft pick to get him because, as you said, he was the best player available of any forward group, I think. And
that's why I like that move for the long term.
Oh, that's
like I think they're the clear winner for long term.
Yes, it's not even close. So I have Boston, and then the other team I have, Frank, and for playoff team, I kind of have 2 because I had to pick one team that isn't a playoff team because I thought what they did was amazing. But I actually like what Toronto did. Toronto's a team that has struggled defensively at times, and Jake McCabe for $2 million. That's going to help you this year, but it's also going to help you running forward. Ryan O'Reilly. I like Noel Acciari. There's lots of teams that really interested in him. I like a lot of their additions. So they had to change some things. I know that you can't solve goaltending, but there was no goaltending option. So when people argue with, what about their goalie? I'm like, name a goalie that was like, is Korpisalo better than Samsonov? No. So I didn't think there was any other option. So I actually like what Toronto did because they had to revamp it, and we'll get into it, but they might have got a huge break here with the Hedman potential injury. We'll have to see what that is because that didn't look great yesterday.
Yeah, but they also got dinged themselves because it sounds like Ryan O'Reilly's going to miss some time with that hand.
Yeah, but hand injury, like he'll miss 3 weeks. I think he'll be back. Hedman, man, that looked like a hip, something that's just the way he went down and stayed down. Like, I never liked seeing those injuries. And we saw what happens at Tampa when Hedman's hurt and can't play in the playoffs. So
neither one of us picked LA with the Gavrikov Korpisalo deal.
I don't like that deal.
Neither one of us picked Minnesota, which I thought they might have made the best value trade of the weekend of the deadline period with Korpisalo. Or not Korpisalo, Klingberg, another K. Getting him at the last minute for a 4th round pick, like what's the risk?
I said it before. I think John Klingberg's a prime prime candidate for somebody who's going to bounce back and just needs a new lease on life. Now, I do want to add
Let's just say, before you do that, let's just say Klingberg is no better than what he's shown this year. Why isn't that worth a 4th round pick?
Oh yeah, no, it's totally fair. I think it's a great value play for them. Although they traded away Greenway, which like obviously they don't like him, but hey, Bill Guerin, whatever he's been doing there,
he's a reclamation project.
Yeah,
I think the Buffalo Sabres, I like that they did something, but I think they way overpaid.
Yeah, for a second.
Let's say, okay, so let's flip the scenario a little bit. Let's say Jordan Greenway is 5'11" or 6 foot, and he has the same production at 2 goals and 4 assists for 6 points. With 2 more years on that deal at $3 million, teams would be forcing you to pay a 2nd round pick to trade that contract. Yeah, now you get a 2nd and a 5th. Like it seemed to me, and I know Buffalo had extra 2nd rounders, and I get that there's a relationship here between Don Granato and Jordan Greenway going back to the U.S. National Development Program. That part of it makes sense. And I also identified the Sabres super early in the process of being a team that for Jordan Greenway made sense. He could be your Kyle Okposo replacement, a guy that, as Okposo is trending towards free agency, when you think of Okposo at his best, was, ferocious in there, using his body, all those things. Greenway can do that, but he hasn't shown any ability to do it on a consistent basis. So he gets a new lease on life. I just don't know that I love the price paid to do it, given like if this waited until the summer and Greenway didn't play any better and didn't do anything in the playoffs, I think Minnesota would have had to probably pay to move him.